Psalm 29, the last verse, verse 11. The Lord gives his people strength. The Lord blesses them with peace. There is one thing, in my opinion, that every human being is after. I think in some ways even children are after, but especially as adults we're after. But many of us, maybe even most of us, don't even know we're after it. We long for it. We work toward achieving it. We strive for it. We do all sorts of things, and some of them are actually counterproductive to getting what we long for. It's peace. Everybody in their right mind wants at least a sense of personal peace. Peace with, we most of us, unless you're, you own some kind of a munitions operation, we want military peace. We want, political peace. That's reasonable. And yet, not in a lot of ways, not very possible or realistic. Okay, we want peace with the people around us. Have you ever worked in a conflicted working environment where there's always tension? You even if no words express it, it is obvious. We got problems here, and it seems to get worse. I'm grateful to say I've not really had that experience very often in my work life. But I've worked with a whole lot of couples and individuals who their marriages were filled with conflict. The number one thing that characterized their marriage was conflict, fighting, hurt feelings, animosity. The list goes on and on and on and on. All of those people, this is just my experience, but all of those people whose marriages were characterized by conflict wanted peace in their marriage. But the problem was their interpretation or opinion of what would give them peace was not legitimate or realistic. People who don't even believe in God want peace within themselves about what is ahead. You would have to go into the deep philosophical waters that I'm not qualified to take anybody into, and certainly not skilled enough to swim anybody out of. But even an atheist is seeking some kind of personal, spiritual peace. All of us are. When you have achieved a measure of peace, feels great. I think, you put it in any context, when you experience peace, you feel the best of any of the feelings. David writes, the Lord gives his people strength. The Lord blesses them with peace. Now here's the key, in my opinion, essentially to all of life. The Lord grants peace. David writes it, the Lord blesses them with peace. Who's them? Just people. In the New Testament, the Apostle Paul writes about this with a phrase that he uses in all of his letters except one. Grace and peace to you. In some form or another, grace and peace to you from God our Father, or through Christ our Lord. In my opinion, this longing for peace, that is, God has planted this longing in us. He's created us to long for peace. It is not an unrealistic thing. It's not irrational to desire peace. It's part of God created us to want that. But how we go about getting it, well, in my opinion, it comes down to, when I experience peace, it's because of something God has done, not something I have done. It is impossible for me to make someone else, anyone else, be at peace with me. Now, I can influence it, I can urge toward peace, but I don't know if you've had this experience, but I have. There are times when I wanted peace so urgently that I did kind of knee-jerk things that didn't bring peace. They only made it worse. And part of the reason for that is, for most people, we experience peace when we get what we want. I mean, that is way too narrow of an understanding or definition of the spiritual peace that I'm talking about. So it comes down to this. I want peace, and that is a legitimate desire. I'm not capable of creating peace, and that's frustrating. Peace is a blessing from God. Now, I mean, okay, you got to walk a long ways with me, but peace is possible. And from what Paul writes, and I didn't tell you the one letter that Paul wrote where he doesn't open with grace and peace is to Timothy, where he writes, grace, mercy, and peace. Well, without grace, there is no peace. There will never be peace without grace. Another way to say that is, grace produces peace. And in fact, in my opinion, the order is essential. Grace precedes peace. Grace, you know, just the one subject I love most of all, is the result of a gift. It is a gift from God. It results in peace. You can't do anything to deserve grace. Anything that you can deserve is not a gift. It's a reward. It's a payment. It's a salary. So grace is God's gift to us that we do not deserve and we did not earn. It's His favor. Well, isn't that fits like a hand in a glove with David's words, the Lord blesses His people with peace. And I believe, I'm firmly convinced that He does this through the agency of grace. Now, got to go a little farther with this whole idea of grace and peace. How do I get grace? Well, on the one hand, if I can do something to get it, it's not a gift. However, there are times where I must position myself in a way that a gift that has been given to me can be received, right? Okay. And I can go into that, but you get it. So I'm going to move into this idea that both James and Peter shed incredible and important light on this subject of grace and how it comes to us. Both James and Peter write, God gives grace to the humble, but He resists the proud. Okay, got both sides of the coin. The proud and the humble. Humility makes us able to, it puts us in a position to receive God's grace. What is humility? Well, I love, my favorite definition, an explanation maybe is a better word, for humility comes from C.S. Lewis, who said humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. Humility is an intelligent, sane estimate of ourselves. Paul writes about that in Romans, where it says, let each one of you have a sane estimate of pardon me, himself, which is, that the gender thing has been eliminated from most modern translations, and I can get on a high horse about that, but I'm not going to. Point is, humility is like, well, one of my favorite books that I've read in probably 15, 20 years now is a book called True-Faced. And the authors there talk about the room of grace. If you've not read the book, I highly recommend it. It's a short book, an easy read. It's not theologically written. It's written conversationally. But the room of grace, which opens a new kind of life to us. But on the doorknob of that room is the word humility. God gives His people strength, and the Lord blesses them with peace, and He does this through grace, which we position ourselves to receive in humility. So, the challenge for today, two challenges. One is, open your eyes, open my eyes to grace that is coming to me, to the strength that God is granting me, instead of all the things that are wrong and problems and frustrations, and open my eyes to the grace. And secondly, open my heart to it through humility. Time's up. See you next time on So Care with Stevie.